Audrey has endured multiple epileptic seizures. Now she can be cured.
We'll be able to record your seizures, but we'll also be able to map the different areas of brain function.
Okay.
And we can also do other tests to really try to understand not specifically how your brain works, but how the brain works in general.
Okay.
And one of the questions that we're very interested in studying is, how do you make conscious decisions?
It's a remarkable procedure. By charting Audrey's brainwaves, neurosurgeons create a fine map of the brain, enabling them to locate and remove the lesion that causes her seizures. At the same time, neuroscientists can examine brain activity during decision-making, seeking brain-based facts about free will. A week later at Caltech, Christoph's partner,
What's that?
neuroscientist Uri Maus, shows me the results.
Oh.
Basically, the patient
I
and
don't
I
know
are
what that one is. Let
playing
me see.
a simple version of rock, scissors, paper, game, like children playing. If I raise the mirror image, what you raise, and let's say I win, and if we raise the same hand, so if you raise your right hand, I raise the right hand, then you win. We start with $5, and every time she wins, I give her 10 cents, so I lose 10 cents and she gains 10 cents. And if she loses, it's the other way around, and if she doesn't react quickly enough, because the idea, of course, you can always just wait to see what the other guy's doing and move.
Might not even have that one yet.
So it becomes competitive. We play for about 50 rounds.
Yeah, I don't think I have that one yet. Let's say it does.
The difference between preparatory activity towards moving the left hand versus moving the right hand, should be able to predict which hand you will raise before the go signal telling you to raise your hand is even there. So we have this grid here, which is much closer to the source
I'll probably
of the
just go
signal
use
than you would have
summons
if
more.
it
I don't know.
was
That's
EEG,
weird.
and it's sitting
It's
here,
funny, I don't
there's
have that yet.
the tissue and the skull and everything, the attenuation of the signal.
Invoker?
And you know where it's coming from. So here we're much closer to the signal. So this grid is in her head.
INVOK.
This grid, we see these wires coming out. From here it goes into these panels here, and from there there's a wire.
Well, I would think mine would have by now. It's weird, I don't have that yet.
And does some analysis, and from that system through another
I
wire
don't see it in
that you
here.
maybe see here, goes into this machine, and I get a beep either on the right ear or on the left ear, which tells me to raise my right hand or my left hand in order to beat the patient. This is half a second.
Hey, this shotgun is amazing, by the way.
Move, and I just wait half a second for the go signal and move. Okay, let's.
It has a very tight reticle.
Okay.
It's called the repulsor shotgun. What we got from one of them bosses. It's really fucking good.
My side in the response box.
I'm using it with the Hunter's Halo though. That helps a lot. The one that increases the range.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, and this time I
But
win.
it's really powerful.
Try it again, and so this goes on like that for about 50 trials. There's a screen behind Audrey. She can't see it, and the screen shows an arrow which hand she's going to raise according to the real-time system. So she's about to raise her.
Oh, we are on normal, but still, even though we're on normal, like those really super strong guys that usually take a while to kill, I can shoot them like 3 times and they die. Like, it's really, really good.
She raised the hand the arrow was pointing at. So we were able to beat her. We played 3 times. I was able to win a relatively large margin 2 of those 3 times. She was competitive about it and happy. That was the important thing for us.
Okay, so what are the implications for free will?
Well, if I can predict what you're doing when your decision is making a difference, it might be stronger evidence that these unconscious processes are affecting also these types of decisions that are more important for our responsibility.
The implications of what you're saying, though, is that if you are able to predict this degree of accuracy that you can, our brain is making our decisions and we're not. It does give us some philosophical pause about what free will is. So Uri and Christoph replicate Lippitt's experiment with more precision, literally on the brain, and the results are
Oh, was that new for you?
Or he can predict what Audrey
Radioactive, what was it?
even before Audrey herself is aware of her own inner
I can't-
decision to do it.
Oh, I can't remember for sure what that
Does
does.
this suggest that free will is an illusion? That our conscious decision to act does not cause us to act? But can science really explain free will? I asked philosopher Jinan Ismail, who focuses on science at its most fundamental level, physics.
Oh,
If physics is
yeah,
the
that's
most
this one. It's a
fundamental
necklace.
science, then everything
It,
that
I
there
haven't
is
tried
in
it
the world,
even. I haven't
including
even ever worn it
ourselves and
once,
including
but.
free psychology, ordinary psychology.
I guess that would be good with
That's
that
all
Devastator
ultimately
weapon,
a more
the
coarse-grained
pistol.
description of what's described completely and precisely and at the most fine-grained level in physics. So the goal of physics is ultimately to at least implicitly encompass all of what there is, including all of the phenomenal feel that is the way listening to a symphony feels to you. It's a matter of great controversy, and it's an unsettled question whether physics ever will be able to resolve that goal. I think right now it's not the case, in my view, that we have any knockdown arguments that that's not possible.
Now what? But even if physics could explain everything, would that make free will an illusion? Free will an illusion? It just doesn't seem right. It seems more a philosophical question. So can philosophy help? I ask Al Neely to explain the philosophy of free will.
We have to start with this notion of determinism. Determinism is the idea that a complete description of the condition of the universe at any point in time, together with a complete list of all the laws of nature, would entail all other truths about the universe, including all truths about everything you'll ever do. That's determinism. Some philosophers say, well, you can't have free will in that case because you could never have done otherwise than you did. Well, suppose determinism isn't true. Then what do you have now? Well, they say randomness at the point of decision.
And so that's not free will either.
That's what they say. Either way, then, there's no free will. But still, people feel as though they're free, and so the claim is, well, that feeling is an illusion. So there are philosophers called compatibilists. And compatibilists say that even if determinism is true, people can act freely. What compatibilists think is that what you need is to be responsive to reasons in a certain way, so that if the...
Good morning, everybody. My name is Alex, and perhaps because of my impending examinations and the very real possibility of failure, I've been thinking a lot about the concept of free will and whether any of us can really be held accountable for our actions. Now, I've already made a video discussing the implications of life without free will with my friend Stephen from Rationality Rules, who also recently discussed free will with Matt Dillahunty and made his own video on the topic as well. Links are, of course, in the description. But I realized that
very
I've never
wide
actually talked
boss
openly
door.
about why I don't believe in free will, except for
Makes
my
me wonder if
somewhat
I fought
obscure
this.
book review of Sam Harris's book on my website. So I thought that today would be
Oh,
the day.
yeah, I think I've seen this
Why?
before.
Well, I don't know.
You may not have.
And, well, I can't know. That's kind of the thing. I'd recommend that you watch Stephen's video, which outlines some more scientific arguments against free will, but to complement that video, I want to take a more philosophical and purely logical approach to the problem. It seems to me that whilst helpful and endlessly interesting, it isn't necessary to reference neuroscience to make a good case against free will, so I won't be doing that today. Now, one of the best-known current critics of free will is, of course, Sam Harris, whose short book You Should Read is what really got me thinking about this originally about a year ago, and who is, of course, a neuroscientist. But you can also find discussions of free will in the works of earlier philosophers like Bertrand Russell. For this video, I'll be all but ignoring neuroscience. Again, that perspective is covered well by Stephen. So, with that out of the way, let's get into this. Here is my case against free will. The first issue that we have to face is, of course, the definition of free will. Since when I'm debating this, I'm the one who's denying the existence of something that someone else believes in, it really needs to be that someone else's definition that I'm using, which is why a video like this what, in any situation, it was completely within the realm of possibility for you to have acted differently to the way that you actually did. For instance, it would have been completely possible for me to have said bonjour at the beginning of this video instead of good morning, and the choice to say the latter was completely within my control. The idea is that you are in control of your actions, and any
That's good
decisions
stuff.
that you make are determined only by your own actions. But the thing is, there are so many things wrong with this that it's difficult to know where to start. I'll borrow a line of thought from Dr. Harris here. Let's begin by considering what would have to be true in order for us to truly have total free will, to be able to have acted differently. Well, firstly, we would need to be aware of everything that is influencing our actions, including environmental factors, our precise mood, the influence of other people, the influence of past experiences, and more. Secondly, we would need to be in control of every one of them. Neither of these are true or even possible. Now, you might conceive this, but not think it a problem. Okay, you say, so I can't control all of the factors that led me to like the taste of ice cream, but on a more mundane level, I'm still in complete control over whether I choose chocolate or vanilla.
Yeah.
Not so fast. Again, consider this most simple of choices, chocolate or vanilla. Or, if it's easier, consider the last mundane choice that you had to make. Walk or drive this morning. Go out or stay in tonight. Think about why you chose one or would choose one over the other. So what would make me choose vanilla over chocolate? Well, there is only one possible answer, which I'll elaborate on shortly. I would need to want it more than chocolate. In order to choose vanilla, I'd need to want vanilla. But is this something I can control? Can I control what it is that I want? Not a chance. Consider the fact that you, presumably, don't want to punch your mother in the face. Can you choose to want to do that? This isn't the same thing as choosing to do it. Could you choose to want to? No more than I could choose to want vanilla over chocolate. I just want chocolate more than vanilla. That's just a fact about myself that I can't change. But okay, let's go further, you say. Of course, I can't choose to want vanilla over chocolate when I really want chocolate, but what if I just decided, in the full knowledge that I would prefer chocolate, to go for vanilla anyway, just for the sake of regaining my free will and nothing else? Well, I'm afraid you'd still face the same problem. The exact same problem, in fact. In order to do that, you'd need to want to regain your free will as you see it. Why is your desire to prove a point like this stronger than the desire to have the ice cream you prefer? It just is. And if it happened not to be, you'd have chosen the ice cream that you do prefer. The key takeaway is this: you cannot determine your wants. Think of something you want. Try to not want it. Think of something you don't want and try to want it. It's not possible. And even if it were, in order to change a don't want into a want, you'd need to want it. And vice versa, to change a want into a don't want, you'd need to want to not want it. You simply can't control what you want. Now, that's one piece of the puzzle, and it may seem odd to leave it there, but just wait until we
No,
put
this
them
is like
together.
totally
Okay,
true
the
that
next
most
piece of
people
the
don't ever
puzzle
think
is to
about it.
convince
There's
you of
literally
this
no
fact,
free will. We're
that
exactly
there are
like
only
robots.
two
Most people
reasons,
have no
none
idea.
more in any circumstances, for which you will ever do anything.
Free will is just a
In
complete
fact,
illusion.
it's impossible for you to ever do anything for any reason other
You've
than
never
one
made
of
a
these
single
two.
decision in your
And those
entire
two reasons
life.
are because you want to or because you're forced to. And this is fundamentally important and worth really understanding and thinking about. You will only ever do anything in your entire life because you either want to or are forced to. That's it. No exceptions. And because of the fact that nobody seems to believe me on this point at first, I'll give you a common objection that I hear all the time. In fact, I recently spoke to ex-NFL player Arian Foster about free will on his podcast. Link again will be in the description once it's up. And he, playing devil's advocate, brought up the following. Consider exercise. Consider going to the gym. Most people don't want to go to the gym, but they do it anyway. Surely this is an example of someone doing something freely and not because they want to or because they're forced to. Not really. Because there has to be a reason for going to the gym. And for most people, and for Arian, it's something like to stay healthy, to stay in shape, to live longer, whatever it may be. So we have to ask again the same fundamental question. Why is the desire to stay healthy stronger than the desire to go to the gym? It just is. Or maybe it isn't. And some people stay at home and eat junk food instead. For these people, why is the desire to sit around or to eat junk food stronger than the desire to be healthy. It just is. Again, remember, you can't control the strengths or objects of your desires. It's they that control you. And if that doesn't unease you, keep those words against yourself until it does. So even when you don't want to do something, but you do it anyway, this is only ever because of a stronger and equally uncontrollable desire to do something that requires you to do it. In other words, most of your actions really are controlled by your wants. And I really mean this. This is what really convinced me of the non-existence of free will. If you aren't convinced that everything you do is either because you want to or because you're forced to, please pause the video and just really think about this. I promise that any example you can think of has a hidden want lying behind it. Leave an example in the comments if you have to. I'm sure someone else can find it if you can't. So
One of
now,
the things
as
that makes
promised,
Final
let's start
Fantasy
putting
so
this together.
interesting,
There
Final
are
Fantasy
two
7,
reasons
where
you
he
will
finds
never
out
do
he's a
anything,
clone, and
because
he
you
starts
want
to
to or
question
because you're forced to.
if,
Of
like,
course, if you're forced to do something, then
oh,
you're
am I
definitely
really
not
like a
acting
real
freely, and
person?
nobody would
Stuff
deny
like that.
So that to me
It's
is
kind of in the
wants.
same way, because
But, well, we've already concluded
I've literally
that you
listened to
can't
this probably
control your
25
wants,
times,
so
and you
actions
kind of need
motivated by
to.
wants aren't really
Just
free
listening to it once
either.
doesn't. And there's a bunch of other
Being
videos that go
forced
with
to do
this, but
something isn't free will.
free will
Wanting
doesn't
to do
exist.
something
It
isn't
literally
free will.
doesn't. You really are a
Being
robot.
forced
I'm not
or
just saying
wanting
that.
to
That's
do
not an
something
opinion.
are the only
Like, it's
reasons
100%
why
fact,
you
and if
do
you listen to
anything.
this shit long enough,
Hence, free
until
will
you
is
finally, until it finally
an
clicks,
illusion. Now, I
you'll
use the word
realize that you
illusion
really are
purposefully
just a
here.
program
One thing
acting
that
itself
nobody needs
out.
convincing of is the fact that we all
And,
feel like we do have
and
free will.
it's like that
I
scene in
certainly do,
Final
and
Fantasy
so does
7
Sam
where
Harris, and so did Bertrand
he like
Russell, as far as I know.
realizes
But
he's a
then
clone,
I suppose
and he's
so
like
would an
going through like this
artificial
hardcore
intelligence
existential
programmed
crisis.
that does have control. And what really is the difference between a mind made of silicon and one made of flesh in relation to liberty of thought? Well,
You start to realize
that's
what that
a topic for
means.
another video, or
Everything you're ever proud of, you don't really have any reason to be
is
proud,
incredibly
because you're
important.
just acting a
So
program
I
out,
just
and you
want to
didn't have any other
explain
choice.
why I think
Everything you ever felt bad about, same thing. You don't have any good reason to feel bad about. Everything you felt good about, everything you felt bad about, as far as like all the ideas about judgment, as far as religion and stuff, whether you'll be like judged as a good person or a bad person or go to heaven or hell, that's, once you realize that free will can't possibly exist, you immediately know none of that can possibly exist. It doesn't mean that there's not some kind of life aside from the physical realm. I'm not saying that. In fact, I don't even believe that. But as far as a judgment day and shit like that, like, I mean, it pretty much blows a lot of shit out of the water when you start thinking about it. If everybody's just robots, then we're not being tested, we're not learning, we're not growing, we're not evolving, we're not becoming, you know, all that's out the window. It's just this thing that's happening. We are a thing that is happening. As much as it seems like we have some choice in the matter, there's not actually. We're just happening. There's not actually a choice doing it. It just seems like there is.
The first definition they think of is the ability to do whatever you want. But I think this is misleading. This, however, is the definition I think Matt is implicitly using here, and I'll explain why. To be clear though, I don't think Matt is wrong, per se, in his conversation with Stephen cleared a lot of this up. His clip is still representative of popular view. The reason I think there's an experiential difference between jumping and being pushed is because if you're defining free will as the ability to do whatever you want, then you're exercising free will by jumping, but not by being pushed. But just think about that definition. What does it mean to do whatever you want? Remember, you can't control your wants, so by doing what you want, you're just acting in accordance with something that's out of your control. It's more accurate to say, rather than you can do whatever you want, that you can only do what you want. Of course that's true, we've already covered this. And it's not freedom to be told you can do anything as long as it's this. The takeaway from my video today to conclude this whole complicated and fearful affair should be this. Yes, you can do whatever you want. You just can't choose what it is that you want. And where's the freedom in that? If this video convinced you, consider why. If not, consider why not. It's out of your control. What I'm saying will either convince you or it won't, and you don't get to decide on that. But whichever way you fall, why not try exercising your free will by hitting subscribe and by watching my discussion with Stephen about the moral implications of all this?
Who am I? Why am I here? What does it all mean? It dawned on me that science per se hadn't answered any of those. So I started a massive, obsessive search, East and West, pre-modern, modern, postmodern, for any types of approaches that actually attempted to help people wake up or become happy or become self-improved or self-developed.
I cannot express how influential this man
Yeah,
has
we're
been
gonna
on the
annihilate
entire
this guy.
spectrum of person.
Hey guys, it's Cosmic Skeptic, and I'm sure that many of you are, like me, currently feeling pretty down, upset, unable to leave the house and meet friends, thinking back to a time when you were free and able to live your life as you pleased without constraints. So I thought I'd take a moment to dispel this notion by reminding you that you were never in fact free in the first place, that free will does not exist, and that the constraints placed upon your freedom by the coronavirus pale in comparison to the constraints placed upon it by your own brain. You know, come to think of it, that probably doesn't help at all. Still, if you haven't already seen it, I made a video a few years back explaining why I believe that free will does not exist.
Oh,
It's a bit of a
right.
weird claim, I know, and if you're interested, you can watch it by clicking the little information thingy that I've hopefully just here. But since then, I've heard a lot of people claiming that a philosophy has the answer to the questions that I raised in that original video all those years ago. And I thought that I'd just take some time to discuss why I think it certainly is not. It's a bit of a complicated one, but bear with me. So the existence of free will is, surprise, surprise, a question that philosophers have been debating since before records began. And the main problem appears to be a contradiction. First, there are really compelling arguments in favor of all our actions being determined. By determined, I mean that if we were to rewind the universe to the same conditions it was in a million years ago, press play, every event would happen in exactly the same way, including the actions of human beings. Man would still land on the moon in 1969, Barack Obama would still be elected president in 2008, and you would once again be sat watching this video whenever it is that you're currently doing so. This determinism is largely a product of the rise of the scientific method and the belief that the universe operates in accordance with laws of cause and effect, that every event in the universe has some sufficient explanation for why it happened, that is, some preceding cause that necessitated it. If everything in the universe is determined by laws in this way, then so is every event that happens in your brain. Right, so that's on the one hand, that's what's called determinism. But on the other hand is this undeniably strong intuition that we are truly free, that multiple courses of action are available to us at any time, and that we're capable of having acted differently in any given situation. That is, if we rewound the universe, I could have worn a different color shirt or made a video about a different topic. The fact that I'm doing this right now and wearing this shirt was not determined by the laws of the universe. Right now, even the most fervent determinist can't deny this.
If you listen to some of this long enough, you'll eventually realize it's true, and I'm not just like hammered and saying something, like it literally is true. It's not necessarily good, it's not necessarily bad. It's like, I mean, because you could look at it from multiple directions. You could look at it in a way that it's bad, but you could also look at it in a way that it's good. But, you know, because in a way, like, the core of humanity is like, hey, I accomplished something, look at me, I'm better than you. But then when you realize free will doesn't exist, you're like, oh, like, you're only better if you're better than somebody, because that's just the way it is. And you really didn't even have anything to do with that. It just happened. So that's bad. It's like, wow, I can't be proud of myself. But, so that seems bad. But then in another way, it's like, you know, like all the worry and confusion about, like, what's the right thing to do, and what should happen and shouldn't happen, and stuff like that. It's just like, well, guess what? It's like, you know, it's gonna be what it's gonna be, and there really isn't good and evil. Those are like terms made up by ignorance, because good and evil can't exist in a world without free will. it's impossible, because the whole idea of evil is somebody who's doing something that's wrong, but not only doing something that's wrong, because like you wouldn't call a 5-year-old child who murders somebody evil. You'd call them ignorant. That's a completely different thing, you know. You'd call them ignorant. They're just an ignorant 5-year-old child who accidentally shot somebody because they didn't really realize that like a bullet would really kill somebody or whatever. And it almost becomes like that. But it's not really about whether it's good or bad anyway. Like a lot of people try to turn the discussion into that. They did the same thing with the religion. They were like, well, what's the result of a world without religion? And it's like, well, that's not the discussion. The discussion is whether God exists or not. You know, the discussion isn't whether the world will be better or worse if we point out that God doesn't exist. That's not the discussion. The discussion is, does God exist? You know, and people try to turn it into what will happen if we say God doesn't exist. You know, and that's a discussion that you can have if you want, but it's like, it's just dishonest to try to all of a sudden be like, okay, now, I don't have any argument against why you said God doesn't exist, so since I don't have any argument against that, I'm going to start all of a sudden arguing that the world's a better place because people believe in God. Okay, that's fine if you want to argue that, we can discuss that too, but that's a separate argument. It's not the same argument as does God exist or does God not exist. It's the same thing with free will. You know, a lot of people get all paranoid and they're like, oh man, if we tell people that, like, what's that going to cause to happen? It might be bad what it causes to happen, because it might freak people out, it might make people suicidal, because without pride and without judgment, what really is there? You know, like, if I can't feel good or bad about myself, like, either way, then, like, what is there? I'm just, like, I'm a robot, yay. But that's not the discussion. The discussion is, does free will exist, or does it not exist? You know, there's two separate discussions. We can discuss, should we pretend it exists, because we're worried about the children? You know, that's a different discussion, though. And people always, like, try to change it, like, right in the middle. And, like, be like, whoa, because they start to realize, they're like, wow, okay, I see, it doesn't exist, but shouldn't we say it does? But, and that's fine. Like I said, that's just a different discussion. But, and I'm not necessarily saying we should or shouldn't. I don't know. I mean, personally, in a way, I feel like the truth is always what should be looked at, regardless of whether it's painful. That's how I feel. A lot of people are like, whatever feels good is what we should do. Like, where's the logic in that? You know, what feels good is sex, but, you know, like, sex... You know, look at, that's how they think in fucking Africa, and each of them in Muslims, that's how they think. And each of them have like 6, 12 kids even. And what's the result? Is that good? Just because it feels good to relax and be like, okay, well, I feel like having babies, so I will. And then they have like 12, 13 of them. And guess what? They can only feed 2 of them. And they literally, like in these other countries, they'll eat their own children. They'll eat them. You know, so is it good to follow your instincts? Or should you think logically about things? And that's what it starts to come down to, you know. You have to ask yourself, okay, I realize, like, admitting God doesn't exist feels like shit. Like, admitting free will doesn't exist might feel like shit. But, like, then you start to ask, should we pretend that these things exist? Because if we pretend these things exist, maybe it feels better. And that's true, it probably does. Probably feels better, but what's the result? You know, when you really look at, oh hell yeah, man, we're gonna get powerful as fuck. That's awesome. I put my Drifter's pants back on just because I wanted the opportunity to like feel all level 20, and I have a level 20 helmet, level 20 jacket, level 20 pants, level 20 pistol. Now I can get this new shotgun I'm using level 10, which will be max level. But yeah, you know, when you're talking about the field of morality, most people are very simple, like children. So they're just like, morality is what I've been told what it is. It's like, no. You know, the real truth is, because that's what, you know, this stuff all connects to like a lot of different things, and one of the things it connects to is morality. And when you say God exists, then you have to say which God. So it's like the Christian God exists, the Muslim God exists. Okay, well in that case, then you can say like whatever they said was right and wrong is what's right and wrong. But then when you say those things don't exist, well, you end up in a conundrum, because then it's like what is right and what is wrong. If there's no God, that means what we say is right and what we say is wrong. So it's kind of just up for grabs in a way. It's like, oh, darn. It's like becomes like a matter of opinion, basically, you know. All this stuff connects together. You know, the free will thing, it's not just, free will exists, free will doesn't exist, and you just don't think anymore about it. Like, obviously, this connects to everything. Because then what's morality? What's morality if free will doesn't exist? Well, there isn't such a thing. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden we can rape people. Just when we feel like fucking somebody, we get to hold them down and rape them because morality doesn't exist. You know, that's when it gets to, like Sam Harris describes it. He points out that just because morality doesn't exist, like morality already doesn't exist for animals, right? Like, if you have a city, and near that city, like California, for example, near California, there are lots of mountain lions. Mountain lions are just cats, you know? They're just cats. If you fucking brought them in your house and fed them, and people do it all the time, you know? They'd act like house cats. They'd be loving little, beautiful little creatures that you could pet, and you could give food, and they're beautiful. They're little cats, you know? They're big cats, but they're still little compared to a human. But you know, and those are in California. But when a mountain lion kills and eats a human being, we don't think of it the same way as we would think if, like, Jeffrey Dahmer killed somebody because he's a person. We're like, oh, that's a person. He has free will, right? He has free will, so that's different. That's different than a mountain lion. So, but people freak out and they're like, oh, if there's no free will, we can't put people in jail. It's like, well, we don't think animals have free will, but do we not put them in jail? Yeah, we do. But we don't, like, hate them, you know? We don't go, oh, the grizzly bear ate this guy's head. He is such an evil son of a bitch. He's so evil. He ate this guy's head and he's evil. He must probably worship Satan, and he's probably in leagues with fucking demons. He's in a cult or something, you know, like he's eating people's heads. It's a bear. He's hungry. He ate somebody's head. Like, you know, we think of it. We don't hate the bear. We're like, even like, in a way, we're like, you know, most people that are sane, they're like, okay, the bear ate somebody's head. That's what he does, yeah. And it's like, it's not like they're like, we should kill the bear, we should hate the bear, we should imprison the bear, we should put the bear in the electric chair. Most people, you know, they're saying, they're like, we should take the bear and send it to a forest that's not near people. And like, we don't even feel like we should punish it. Because why would you punish something for doing just what its instincts are? And when you actually realize, it's because, you know, it gets more complex. It's easy to see with the bear. It's easy to see that it doesn't have free will. You just know. You just look at it and you're like, it's an animal and it's just kind of doing what it feels like doing. But with humans, it seems more complicated on the surface. I'm gonna keep playing this video here in a second, but like, you know, it actually ends up being literally the exact same thing. The exact same thing. And when you realize that, you all of a sudden realize, like, all these fucking myths of fucking judgment, and there's good people and bad people and different things. It's literally just like, and that's the extreme version, you know, I'm talking about murder and stuff, but, you know, I'm even talking about just people that are more responsible and less responsible. It's the same thing. Like, and that's not to say that you can't change, like, but it's also not to say that you can be whatever you want to be, like they try to fucking tell you or whatever. You can be the president when you grow up. You know, some people can, some people can't. So, you know, it gets into a very, it's not just black and white, it's very gray. There's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of areas in there where you have to see that. Fucking son of a bitch, hang on. But yeah. Hey, bring him in this room again. I got my turrets in the center of this room. And I think everybody always fights in this room too, I think. With all the enemies. I don't know, there's something about... I'm not really totally sure why, but... Well, just stay in here, because I don't know why every time I always fought this boss, everybody always comes in here. I'm not totally sure the reason. I tried chasing him before. He like climbs walls and stuff, and he like eventually comes right down. But everybody always comes in here. You know, like Seb does. You know, that's a different conversation. Whether it's good or bad. Maybe it's horrible. Maybe it's horrible that free will doesn't exist. You know, that's a different conversation. But as far as discussing it, you know, there's definitely things you can notice that are good, and there's things you can notice that are bad. Like, once you realize that it's true, first of all, like yeah, I forget what that does. But like, first of all, like, when you realize that's not true, one of the things that happens is, like, you know, any of us, you, me, everybody that I know, and everybody on the whole planet has things that they're proud of and things that they're ashamed of. And so, you know, like I said, on the one hand, it's like all the things you're proud of, it's kind of like, whoops, like I'm not even really responsible for that shit, so that's bad. But then on the other hand, all the shit you're ashamed of, that evaporates too, because it's like, oh, I'm just a grizzly bear. I'm just a grizzly bear that's like going for its food and doing what my brain tells me to do. And, you know, that's a very simplistic way of putting it, but you don't really have any guilt anymore. It's like impossible to have guilt once you realize this. It's also impossible to have pride. That's like, that's the double-edged sword of it. It's like, I don't really get to feel that good about it. But then there's like sort of an enlightened perspective, which is beyond both of those, which is that kind of, regardless of whether you're entirely responsible or not, you can still enjoy things that are enjoyable. So, you know, you can still better yourself, like, if you can. Like, if you can't, then you don't have to necessarily feel bad, like, oh, I can't, and that's probably because I'm a lazy dick. No, it's probably just because you can't. But at the same time, you can still try, and probably, you know, like, you know, unless if you actually have mental retardation or something, there's probably aspects of your life that you can change and improve on. It's not to say that you can't improve. That's not what saying free will doesn't exist means. It's completely different. That's like fatalism or something, saying that whatever is going to happen is going to happen. That's completely different. That's called fatalism. Fatalism is, you know, completely stupid. Fatalism doesn't make any sense. That's saying that literally you can just sit here and you can think in any way and you can do nothing and things will turn out exactly the same. That's obviously not true. You can make choices. You can make choices. You do have determination over what the future will be to many extents. But the amount of choices, you know, it's kind of like on these games, like, you only have certain things you can put points into. I can't put points into, like, I don't want to have bleed damage anymore, because that doesn't exist on this game. You know, it's like real life too. Like, there's certain things you can't put points into, and there's certain things you can. So it's not to say that there aren't choices. There's obviously choices. You know, there's still things you can do. It's not to say, oh, I'm a robot, so I'm just gonna sit here and not think no more. That's fatalism. That's bullshit. But at the same time, it's just pointing out that you're in a framework. You're in a framework, just like this video game. You're in a framework that was pre-designed, and the pre-designed framework, you can't change that. Like, we can't change that this building is the shape that it is. We can choose to walk through the door or not. Like, we can walk through this door. We can not walk through this door. But we can't choose what's on the other side. And, you know, we can choose like whether we're brave or not, and we try to like bravely face what's on the other side and stuff, but like we can't choose whether or not we're actually capable or not capable of defeating what's on the other side. So there are, it's not as simple as a lot of people like try to make it sound. It's not just like, oh, there's no free will, and then that means this and that, and people try to jump to all these conclusions. It's not like that. There's plenty of choices involved. It just, your choices are limited. Your choices aren't free. So you can freely choose the choices that you've not freely been given. So it's like a little bit of both, almost. Like in some ways, the way to describe it would be like there's a gray area. But I don't know. It's an interesting thing to mentally explore. But like I said, once you really think about it long enough, you'll realize it's like so obvious that it's like amazing that anybody questions it. That's the point. Like when you first hear about it, you're like, you must be insane. But like then when you think about it long enough, you'll actually realize like anybody who thinks that free will exists is insane. But at the same time, it's also it's a very gray area. It's very in between. It's not so black and white like you'd initially think.
Strength of the feeling that free will exists, that our actions aren't determined.
I'm gonna start this over.
Hey guys, it's Cosmic Skeptic, and I'm sure that many of you are, like me, currently feeling pretty down and upset about being quarantined, unable to leave the house and meet friends, thinking back to a time when you were free and able to live your life as you pleased without constraint. So I thought I'd take a moment to dispel this notion by reminding you that you were never in fact free in the first place, that free will does not exist, and that the constraints placed upon your freedom by the coronavirus pale in comparison to the constraints placed upon it by your own brain. Come to think of it, that probably doesn't help at all. Still, if you haven't already seen it, I made a video a few years back explaining why I believe that free will does not exist. Now, it's a bit of a weird
put my
claim,
pistol
I
on
know,
again.
and if you're interested, you can watch it by clicking the little information thingy that I've hopefully remembered to put just here. But since then, I've heard a lot of people claiming that a philosophy called compatibilism is the answer to the questions that I raised in that original video all those years ago, and I thought that I'd just take some time to discuss why I think it certainly is not. It's a bit of a complicated one, but bear with me. So the existence of free will is, surprise, surprise, a question that philosophers have been debating since before records began.
It's good to also, you can hear these arguments, and the arguments are good either way, but it also helps sometimes depending on who the argument's coming from. And like, this is a good person to be making the argument because he is a straight A student that goes to Harvard, like the hardest possible school, and he fucking makes excellent grades and is doing excellent. So there's no reason for him to want biasly to deny free will. Really, like, it's different if somebody's like, oh, I'm a loser, free will doesn't exist, but then when you take somebody like him, he makes over $10 million a year and has succeeded at literally everything that he's ever done, but he's an intellectual, so he likes to just look at things for the way they are regardless of how it feels. It kind of matters sometimes who it comes from. He's very, very rich and successful, and has a very, very, very above average IQ, so it's nice to see it coming from somebody like this.
And the main problem appears to be a contradiction between two thoughts. First, there are really
I don't know what the fuck happened. What were we doing?
Oh,
well, we're still looking
that
for that.
To rewind the universe to the same conditions it was in a million years ago.
I guess we gotta find that guy again.
Every event would happen in exactly the same way, including the actions of human beings.
Yeah,
Man
well,
would still land on the moon.
Yeah, we didn't have to go that way.
Barack Obama would still be elected president in 2008, and you would once again be sat watching this video.
There's like all these doors that go everywhere.
So. This determinism is largely
This basically needs to stay in the desert.
Scientific method and the belief that the universe operates in accordance with laws of cause and effect. That every event in the universe has some sufficient explanation for why it happened. That is, some preceding cause that necessitated it. If everything in the universe is determined by laws in this way, then so is every event that happens in your brain. Right, so that's on the one hand, that's what's called determinism. But on the other hand is this undeniably strong intuition that we are truly free. that multiple courses of action are available to us at any time, and that we're capable of having acted differently in any given situation. That is, if we rewound the universe, I could have worn a different color shirt, or made a video about a different topic. The fact that I'm doing this right now and wearing this shirt was not determined by the laws of the universe. Right now, even the most fervent determinist can't deny the strength of feeling that free will exists.
Well, we
That our
just
actions
we just need to go
by
back to the
universe in
desert
this
because
way,
that's the only
but by
place
our
it
own
is.
volition instead. It's a very difficult intuition to let go of. So this clash between determinism and free will leads to the problem. How do we square these? Well, some do so simply by denying either determinism or free will. Okay, so some people deny that determinism is true and say that human action is free, perhaps through some method of causation
we were already
we don't fully
there.
understand. Others, including myself, do the opposite, affirming determinism.
Well, let's go to the
and denying that
checkpoint
free
and go
will
back to
exists.
Ron.
Strictly speaking, I'm not a determinist because I think that some things in the universe might be random, but random events are also out of my control by definition, so I would still deny that free will exists. But there is one other brave and, in my view, entirely misguided group called the compatibilists. As the name suggests, the compatibilist believes that free will exists and that determinism is true, and that these two propositions are perfectly compatible with each other. Compatibilism has a long and rich history, with advocates including Thomas Hobbes and David Hume, and more recently Daniel Dennett, whose fiery debate with Sam Harris on the subject may be familiar to you. And in the face of this pantheon of respected compatibilist philosophers and detailed arguments, now stand I, a third-year philosophy undergraduate with a YouTube channel, who thinks he can debunk it all.
It's basically,
in my defense,
nobody really ever says this, but there's like this unspoken stress going on that it's basically because there's like a religious community and there's an atheist community, and the religious community is like, well, atheism leads to this. Once again, that's not the argument, but yeah, it does. Like, it leads to you realizing free will doesn't exist, and then that creates a lot of fucking problems. I'm not saying it's good. That's not the argument. It's not the argument isn't atheism is better than religion. The argument is it true or not? But a lot of people try to turn it into that, and so there's a bunch of atheists that have created this thing called compatibilism, where it doesn't even make any sense. It doesn't even, there's no point in me even trying to go through the arguments, because it's really, really bad arguments. Really bad arguments. There's like no chance this is true. But what they're trying to do is basically, the shotgun does that. It makes it go to another dimension. It tries to make it sound like free will could exist even though the laws of physics exist, and it's just so stupid. But they're doing it. They're not doing it because they really believe it. That's the thing a lot of people don't realize. It's not like people actually believe this. They're just really afraid to say, okay, yeah, like science and atheism leads to the realization that free will doesn't exist, and they don't want to tell people that because, like, it is horrifying. It's a horrifying fucking realization. It's just absolutely horrifying. It takes away everything that, you know, a human being is pride, honor, you know, my country is great, and this and that, or whatever. Like, everything that makes a person, it takes away, because it's like all of a sudden, like, no, you're just something doing what it does, and you didn't even ever actually choose anything. But once again, that's not the argument. It's not about whether it's good or bad. It's about what is true and what isn't. And, you know, some people are like, we shouldn't worry so much about what's true or not. We should worry about what feels good. We should say stuff that feels good. And, you know, but then again, you know, sex feels good. But people that have fucking cancer in their genetics have babies, and their kids get fucking cancer and they die screaming in agony. Is that good? Just because it felt good in the first place? And you gotta think a little bit deeper.
Of actual professional philosophers. So let's start with one of the earliest compatibilists, Thomas Hobbes, who in his magnum opus, The Leviathan, in chapter 21, entitled
Oh, we're at the time thing again.
says the following:
Well, we're fine. We're used to it now.
Signifieth properly the absence of opposition. By opposition, I mean external.
I kind of wish I had my dog out,
That is to
but
say, so long as whatever you want to do is not limited by some
maybe that.
constraint, you are free. That's it. So if you will to drive your car and do so, you acted freely, so long as whatever caused you to do so is internally determined and not subject to either compulsion or constraint by any external factors, such as your car breaking down or something. Thus, says Hobbes, a free man is he that in those things which by his strength and wit he is able to do, is not hindered to do what he has a will to. So, free will, according to this capitalist, would be defined simply as the ability to do. This seems forceful at first, right? If you can do whatever you want, you're a free being. But there's a problem with this. And the problem I'm thinking of was highlighted well by the pessimist philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, who pointed out that, yeah, sure, you can do whatever you will, but you can't will what you will, right? I mean, imagine that you wanted to save money, and so you put some funds in your bank account. According to Hobbes, so long as nothing external to you was
Holy
compelling
shit.
you or restricting you, you acted totally freely in
I
depositing
just shotgun, like I shot that guy twice in the body,
to save that money.
and then once in the head, and he died. These big dudes,
To waste the money.
really quick.
That's
I
not
probably
the same
could
thing
have
as
only
simply
shot him
choosing
once
to
or twice
waste
in the
it.
head.
Could you choose to want to waste it? I certainly couldn't choose to want to waste my own money. And even if you could choose to want it, crucially, in order to do so, you would need to want to do it. And if you could control that want,
Yeah, just
you
think
need
about
to
this
want
part
to
here.
want to want it. And right now, even the most fervent determinists can't deny the strength of the feeling that free will exists, that our actions aren't determined by the universe in this way, but by our own volition instead. It's a very difficult intuition to let go of. So this clash between determinism and free will leads to how do we square these? Well, some do so simply by denying either determinism or free will. Okay, so some people deny that determinism is true and say that human action is free. Perhaps there is some method of causation we don't understand. Others, including myself, do the opposite, affirming determinism and denying that free will exists. Strictly speaking, I'm not a determinist because I think that some things in the universe might be random, but random events are also out of my control by definition, so I would still deny that free will exists. But there is one other brave and, in my view, entirely misguided group called the compatibilists. As the name suggests, the compatibilist believes that free will exists and that determinism is true, and that these two propositions are perfectly compatible with each other. Now, compatibilism has a long and rich history, with advocates including Thomas Hobbes and David Hume, and more recently Daniel Dennett, whose fiery debate with Sam Harris on the subject may be familiar to you. And in the face of this pantheon of respected compatibilist philosophers and detailed arguments, now stand I, the third-year philosophy undergraduate with a YouTube channel who thinks he can debunk it all. In my defense, I will be relying on the arguments of actual professional
By the way, this
philosophers.
is
So
also not some fringe idea. Like I said, if you listen to it long enough, you'll just agree with it. I'm not expecting you to. It's called a fallacy when you just say some person with a degree said this. The fallacy is called appeal to authority fallacy. It's a fallacy, obviously, because you could be a person with a degree who's a Christian. You can be a person with a degree who's a Muslim. You can be a person with a degree who's an atheist. The degree doesn't actually prove anything. Like, there's literally people with the exact same degrees. They're atheists, Muslims, and Christians, and every other religion. Hindus, everything else. So the degree does not prove your point. That's called a fallacy because, in this case, you're just saying this person has a degree, and so, therefore, this is right. And that's not what this is. Like, if you actually, like, think and listen to this long enough, you'll just understand that there isn't any argument against it. But I'm not saying like, hey, you know, this guy has a degree, so listen to him. That's completely bullshit. You could do that for literally any position in life. You could say, you could find any position in life, literally any position. It's Christian, Muslim, atheist, abortion, non-abortion, anything. You could find somebody who has some really, really hardcore degree and be like, look, this person says so. But that's a fallacy. That's a fallacy because it's appeal to authority. It doesn't prove anything is the reason it's a fallacy. I mean, bottom line, that's the reason it doesn't appeal anything. Or that's the reason it's fallacy, because it doesn't prove anything. But it's just, it's just whether or not you actually have a good argument or not. And that's mostly what anyone who believes otherwise in this, they're actually doing another fallacy called just, I forget what it's called. It's like emotional bias, basically. Just you don't want to believe that that's not true. Well, obviously not wanting something doesn't provide any evidence whatsoever. It's just a matter of whether it's true or not.
Start with one of the earliest compatibilists, Thomas Hobbes, who in his magnum opus, The Leviathan, in chapter 21, entitled The Liberty of Subjects, says the following: Liberty, or freedom, signifieth properly the absence of opposition. By opposition, I mean external impediments of motion. That is to say, so long as whatever you want to do is not impeded by some external constraint, you are free. That's it. So if you will to drive your car and do so, you acted freely, so long as whatever caused you to do so is internally determined and not subject to either compulsion or constraint.
You should
by
totally
any
level the
external
shotgun up.
factors, such as your
It's
car
fucking
breaking
beast.
down or something. Thus, says Hobbes, a free man is he that in those things which by his strength and wit he is able to do, is not hindered to do what he has a will to. So free will, according to this compatibilist, can be defined simply as the ability to do what you want to do. This seems plausible at first, right? If you can do whatever you want, you're a free being. But there's a problem with this. And the problem I'm thinking of was highlighted well by the pessimist philosopher